I'm Rebecca Pigram, Public Information Officer for Rockingham County. Today, I am joined by our Community Development Director, Hiram Marziano. Thank you so much for joining us, Hiram. There's a lot that you do in your job as Community Development Director. Today, I wanted to sit down and just chat about something kind of basic, so just a straight standard rezoning and what that process looks like here in Rockingham County.
All right, great. Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
A straight rezoning, standard rezoning, sometimes referred to as a non-conditional rezoning, is just a basic process laid out by the general statutes and adopted by local jurisdictions which have zoning, that basically you can take subject land zoned X and transfer it to subject land zoned Y. The applicant will come in, present the application, and we'll go through the process from there.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about the process. I know you said an applicant can bring in that application. Who can apply for a standard or a straight rezoning?
Usually it's the property owner themselves, or sometimes it's someone interested in purchasing that property, but they still must do so with the owner's authorization. That's why our applications often include signature lines for both applicant and owner. And then there's also owner affidavits to be notarized for if there's an estate, multiple property owners, things in that situation. So everyone must agree to the rezoning process before we can even entertain the idea.
Okay. Where can someone maybe obtain an application to rezone?
They are always welcome to visit our office. They can email us as well. Go to our website, and under the community development page, there's applications for pretty much anything that they could actually want to do with our development ordinance. Okay,
perfect. So now that we've got the application process out of the way, what happens when they submit that application? Take us through the steps between the application submission and the decision that is ultimately made by, I'm assuming, the county commissioners?
Yes.
Perfect.
First of all, we begin with a review initially by staff. A lot of times the application will include why the person thinks it's reasonable, why they want to do this project, if they have a project in mind. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's speculative. They don't have to list anything, but we'd like to sit down and ask them, are they sure that whatever uses are in the zoning district that they're going to would fit their desires for the future?
Absolutely.
So we do that little bit of round robin work with them. We review for consistency in our land use plan. Sometimes it's not just a land use plan. We look at all of our plans. There may be economic plans. There may be transportation corridor studies. Any type of plan that we have in our office that we will draw from and prepare some documentation to take to the planning board for review. Our process as staff is just to prepare information to take it to the decision makers in the county. And the first stop would be the planning board, who will entertain public records. They'll entertain public comments, they'll entertain deliberation amongst themselves, and sometimes if they need to, we'll hear testimony from experts or whatnot. Not technically evidentiary testimony, but anybody who may have information about this process or either for or opposed, and taking all that together before they settle on a recommendation to the planning board for either approval or recommend denial.
Gotcha. So with that planning board, you said recommendation or denial. So let's talk a little bit about that. What if a planning board recommends a rezoning to the county commissioners, what does that look like?
Well, they'll go through the motion process like anyone else, and they're going to make a motion to recommend approval or recommend denial. What they're going to look for is consistency with our plans. They're also going to look for reasonableness within the area. So they'll take into account, again, some type of consistency statement. Yes, this is consistent. It may even be no, this is not consistent. It's just they need to look at how it is or is not consistent, and they need to look for reasonableness. Is this a reasonable rezoning for that property? Is this reasonable use? Is this a reasonable category? How's it going to affect everybody? And then they will adopt a statement that holds both a consistency and reasonableness determination. Again, it could be consistent, non-consistent, reasonable, unreasonable, and they'll take that into consideration in their motion to either recommend approval or recommend denial. And then that will be forwarded on to the Board of Commissioners.
So if the planning board recommends approval to the commissioners, it then goes to the commissioners. Now, what happens if a plan is recommended a denial to the Board of Commissioners? Let's touch on that a little bit.
It's actually exactly the same thing.
Okay.
We would still take it to the Board of Commissioners and go through the next step of that process, which we'll cover in a second. But whether they recommend approval or whether they recommend denial is up to the Board of Commissioners to make a final determination. They need to take into account staff recommendation, they'll take into account planning board recommendation, but they will make a final determination based on all those factors together. So whether it's recommended for approval or denial, the important thing is that they've recommended to the Board of Commissioners as per general statute.
Gotcha. Okay, so now that the planning board has either recommended to approve or recommend to deny, it moves to the county commissioners. What
Right.
happens at the county commissioner meetings?
Well, prior to going to the county commissioner meeting, we start into the public hearing process.
Okay.
There's signage placed out at the property. We also do this prior to the planning board, but it's required for the Board of Commissioners. We will hold advertisements and notifications. We notify out 1,000 feet away from around the property, which is more extensive than what is required by state law. State law requires us to do abutting property owners and adjacent property owners because across the street would be considered adjacent. But we also do 1,000-foot radius around all the property boundaries so that there's more chance for public input. So from that point, we'll advertise in a local newspaper. We post it on our website. We send out notices that there's going to be a meeting for a public hearing to receive public comment before the Board of Commissioners at X date. At that meeting, staff will present our determinations and our recommendations. We also have to present the planning board's recommendation, usually in a written format. Also discuss sometimes the comments that came up from the planning board meeting as well. So everybody's comments all get pushed forward to the Board of Commissioners. So now that they have all this data, the public gets up to speak to the board for their public hearing, and then they will take into that account those public comments. They'll take into account the planning board recommendation, whether for approval or denial, whether consistent or non-consistent, whether reasonable or unreasonable, and they'll take in staff recommendations, and then they will deliberate. During that deliberation, since this is a straight non-conditional rezoning, and they're not allowed to really consider an individual specific use, they actually have to compare the uses that are of the current base zoning district and the uses of the district that it is going to, and they have to take into account the entire list that's in our ordinances that would fall into that category, whether they're special use permits, permitted by right, permitted by right with regulations. They have to consider that the availability of that property being a good fit for all those uses and how they all interact with the neighboring properties, which is why often applicants will not put down their specific uses, and even if they do, we then have to remind the planning board, the Board of Commissioners, the public even, that we have to take into account all possible uses and how all those uses relate to the area and not just someone's individual request. And at that point then, the Board of Commissioners will then make a final determination whether they will approve the rezoning, deny the rezoning, or table it for further information. But at some point they have to come out and either approve or deny it.
Well, Hiram, thank you so much for this very detailed, in-depth description of how to rezone property here in Rockingham County. You've given us a lot of information to digest. So if you at home have any questions, head on over to our county website, www.rockinghamcountync.gov. All of this information can be found under our Community Development tab. This information, as well as any sort of rezoning that happens here in Rockingham County, I just send you out to our website to find those very specific details that take place in Rockingham County. Thank you for joining us today.